Good afternoon, Heritage Community. I'm Jay Prince, President and CEO. Over the last year, COVID-19 has affected our lives in many different ways. I understand that it hasn't been easy. Together as a world, as well as here at home, we have learned together, we've struggled together, and we've supported each other through an unprecedented time. I have never been so proud of Heritage Community, our mission, and what we stand for. I have seen true heroes, and I have also seen the reality of humanity in action. Regardless of our job title, we're all real people every day trying to make a difference while balancing home, life, fears, loneliness, in an uncertain world. What I've learned is that Heritage is strong. Its people are resilient. And at the center of what we do, we care deeply about others. Today, we want to take stock, we want to appreciate, and we want to honor you and those that we have served over the past year. Now I'd like to turn it over to Paul Barber, our Vice President and COVID-19 Incident Commander. Paul.
Thank you, Jay. And good afternoon, Heritage Community. As a community, over the last year, we've experienced more changes, more emotions, more challenges than any other time in our history. While important events seem to happen nearly every day, I wanted to take a moment to go through some of the milestones that we experienced over the last year. I'll start with March 10th, 2020. That was the day the first confirmed case of COVID-19 in the state of Michigan was discovered. It was also the date that the Governor Whitmer issued the state of emergency order. Just a few days later, the governor signed the executive order to prohibit visitors from in healthcare facilities and residential care facilities. Also later that month, you probably remember the stay-at-home order that began, and the roadways were very sparse in those days, and our staff still showed up to work every day to serve our residents and support each other. At the beginning of April, Heritage began developing and building the COVID-19 isolation unit at the Upjohn Care and Rehabilitation Center. April was also the month when Heritage required the use of masks across our entire campus. And this was also the month when we saw our first staff member who had tested positive for COVID-19 on campus. 2 months later in June, we reached our 100th day of responding to COVID-19. And this was also the month where our first resident had tested positive. Sadly, later that month, our first resident had passed away after testing positive for COVID-19. Around that same time, we had started weekly testing for COVID-19 of staff and residents at the Upjohn Care and Rehabilitation Center. I think we can all remember what that felt like, waiting for our first test and then having to wait 2 to 3 days for the results to come back. And now it's just 15 minutes or less that we have to wait. 2020 wasn't all COVID-19. Heritage Community held a groundbreaking ceremony for Revel Creek, our first new building in over 30 years. We also celebrated Heritage Community's 75th anniversary in October. And near the end of October, a ray of hope shone through the clouds when we started getting news that a COVID-19 vaccine might be available by the end of the year. In November, we launched the Virtual Memory Care Learning Center, and we expanded weekly testing across campus to all of our communities. In November, we also continued to build on our initiative to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion on campus by initiating an employee survey where we asked our employees about their views and perspectives on DEI. And then the Sunday after Christmas, we received the news that our first vaccine clinic was going to be the following week in the first week of January. We're now into March, and we've now hosted all 3 of our initial vaccine clinics on campus, and 97% of our residents and 57% of our staff have all been vaccinated, along with a good number of our volunteers as well. In-person visitation has returned to all of our communities on campus. Communal dining has returned, and so have group activities. What a wonderful thing for all of our residents. And as of today, from the start of the pandemic to date, we have had 140 cases of COVID-19, 148 cases of COVID-19 on campus. 81 of those cases have been residents, and 67 of those have been staff. So the pandemic is not over, and our timeline continues on, but the future looks more hopeful every day. I'll end by saying thank you. I am and have always been very proud to serve alongside each of you, and I'm grateful for the courage and the wherewithal that you've brought to work every day when you've come to Heritage over this last year. And with that, I'll say thank you again and then turn it over to Stephanie Farrell, our Vice President of Human Resources.
A year ago, our world changed. Many things that were part of our typical everyday life came to a halt. However, one thing that never changed for Heritage was the need for our staff. In some ways, we needed our staff more than ever to be able to provide care for our residents. Our staff was committed to dealing with the virus face-to-face every day while at work, and we know this is a monumental task. While joining the organization myself about a month ago, I still see signs around campus that say, Heritage Heroes. That slogan is something that resonates with me as I think about what our staff has endured this past year. Many of us have had to change the way we work as safety procedures were implemented on campus and throughout the state. While at times it probably felt like a lot of extra work, all of our safety procedures were put into place to help keep our residents and our fellow coworkers safe. We stayed diligent throughout the year, and we have to continue to do so to move past this pandemic. Within my short time at Heritage, one story sticks out to me from a resident's perspective. They shared with me how tough this year had been on them personally and how important our staff members had become to them. Visitation had shut down, and residents were not able to have visitors the way they had prior to COVID. Our staff had become their family and their friends. To me, that's what it means to be a Heritage hero. I know this year was hard. We battled stress and emotional challenges every day, yet we showed up. We showed up for our residents, and we showed up for each other. Thank you so much for putting in all the extra effort that's required every day to keep both our residents and our coworkers safe. The work you do is so impactful, and it makes me so proud to reflect back on this past year and see how far we've come. Thank you. And now I'll turn it back to Jay Prince.
Before we pause for our brief moment of reflection, I'd like to invite one of our wonderful CNAs from the Care Center, Mr. Mike Riggle, to share his perspective. Mike.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Riggle. I am a CNA here at Heritage Community of Kalamazoo. I had my share of COVID-19 last year, like everyone did. I had several friends that died from it, and in November I tested positive. I was sick for a few days, but I got back up and went to work when I was cleared. And it was very sad going back, walking down the hallway, seeing the resident room identification tags. A lot of the names were gone because they had passed from COVID-19. It was a very dark moment for all of us. We all experienced it. I just want to say I can't express the importance of getting the vaccine. There's no time for excuses or debates anymore. We got to do this. So get the vaccine if you have the opportunity. And one more thing I want to say is tough times don't last, but tough people do. And we are Heritage Strong. Thank you, and God bless you.
Well said, Mike. I now ask that you join me in remembering all those that have been impacted by COVID-19. Thank you. I would now like to invite Kim Loftus, our Vice President of Fund Development, to share a few final comments before we conclude today's live event. As she comes up, I'd like to share my appreciation to her for organizing today's YouTube Live. Thank you, Kim.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Jay. While this year has not been like any other year we've ever experienced, Heritage Community has always continued to thrive because we live in a community that is most generous. We are most grateful for the tremendous support that we have received this past year, and we received it in so many different ways. Thank you to each of you who have responded, whether it was a financial gift, it was a word of encouragement, it was a gift of meals or other items to support the residents and your coworkers. It was sharing of your time, whether it was virtually or during the warm winter months through this window visits. There are so many different ways that people showed us they cared and wanted to help support us. We are so grateful for each and every gesture. This past year will not be a year that we ever forget. We acknowledge the anniversary of the pandemic, along with the challenges and losses we have all faced. We will continue to recognize the compassion and support that we each can give and receive through this difficult time. Let us make sure that we value our time together more than ever before. Thank you for spending your time with us today, and take a moment to reflect on what has transpired this past year and how much stronger we're going to be going forward. Thank you, stay safe